The Colombian Senate has rejected the motion of censure against Defense Minister Diego Molano for his responsibility in the brutal repression of peaceful protesters. Tens of thousands of people have fled the Eastern Democratic Republic of the Congo city of Goma as authorities warned of possible new eruptions from the Congo volcano. Syrian President Bashar Al-Assad has secured a fourth term in office after winning the presidential elections held on Wednesday with 95.1% of the vote. From the headquarters of teleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South, and I'm Katrina Goss. On Thursday, the Colombian Senate rejected the motion of censure against Defense Minister Diego Molano for his responsibility in the brutal repression of peaceful protesters. With 31 votes in favour and 69 against, the upper house of the Colombian Congress decided not to remove the minister from office. Molano faced accusations regarding the use of warlike tactics by the security forces against the widespread mobilisations that have been taking place across the country for the past month, with gross human rights violations denounced, including the killing of peaceful protesters. In response to the decision, Senator Gustavo Petro said that those who voted against the motion were accomplices in the repression that the Colombian people have suffered. At least 236 people, including women and children, were injured on Wednesday in a new day of repression by the National Police's mobile anti-riot squadron against the national strike mobilizations taking place across Colombia. According to reports by activists in the sector of Usme in the south of the capital, Bogotá, the violent crackdown by law enforcement left 185 people wounded on Wednesday night. Of these, 18 suffered bullet wounds, 5 were seriously wounded with stun grenades to the head, and a young man reportedly lost his life. As local media informed, in the Chicala neighbourhood, 25 people were injured after being confronted by police officers. The anti-riot squadron also attacked citizens this Wednesday in the Terra Nova sector in the southwestern department of Valle del Cauca, leaving 26 people injured, according to hospital sources. And similar scenes were experienced on Wednesday in Bucaramanga, the capital of the department of Santander, where the security forces fired tear gas and live ammunition at demonstrators, with the total number of injured and detained still not clear, according to human rights organisations. In the neighbourhoods of Umasa and Santa Librada, the police prohibited the free transit of ambulances and medical personnel to attend to the wounded. From April 28th to May 25th, 3,155 cases of police violence have been reported, as well as 43 killings at the hands of security forces, according to a report by the non-governmental organisation Temblores. The organisation denounced 1,385 arbitrary detentions of demonstrators, 46 victims of eye injuries due to police deliberately shooting at their faces, 165 cases of gunshot wounds inflicted by the police, and 22 victims of sexual violence. In his first days in office, Ecuadorian President Guillermo Lasso announced a series of measures, one of which is the repeal of the Basic Communications Act, thus eliminating the public media. Several sectors have pointed out that this project is a nod to the private media outlets that are aligned with his administration. Our correspondent Denise Herrera brings us the details.
According to the government, the 14-page document proposing changes to the communications law seeks to respect freedom of expression and to establish minimum conditions to promote this right. However, some points of the bill are not clear. Such is the case of the issue of the right of reply and to rectification.
Do not be deceived. Many media, in the course of time and before the law came into force, did not rectify inaccurate information, and the same happened when their replies. In the case of rectification, it was not necessarily carried out to the same extent at the same time as in the written press.
Part of the bill establishes principles such as freedom of expression and press shall not be considered as a right limited to professional exercise of communication. However, one of the reactions regarding this announcement is that although it is an important issue, it is not the most urgent in the midst of the economic and health crisis that the country is experiencing.
It seems to me that we do not know enough about his economic efforts, which he did not mention in his inaugural speech. What is going to happen with fiscal issues, taxes, mining, tourism, etc. It seems to me that he falls short and chooses to address a topic that, in my opinion, is only for the applause of his platform, which is the mass media.
Analysts and human rights defenders warn that the bill contains several loopholes.
If you compare what President Moreno did with what Lasso is doing, they are exactly the same things in relation to the Communication Act. And what is he doing? He is dismantling the constitutional rights in terms of communications established in the Act, removing the possibility of being accountable to citizens and making the guarantee of rights more expensive or complex in the judicial and administrative spheres.
The bill, titled The Basic Law on Freedom of Expression and Communication, comes in the first day of Lasso's administration, which also eliminates public media.
The Cuban Foreign Ministry this Thursday rejected the U.S. State Department's certification that Cuba does not fully cooperate with U.S. anti-terrorism efforts, as published by the U.S. Federal Register on May 25th. According to a Foreign Ministry statement, the completely unfounded accusation is used by the U.S. to pursue its political aims in an attempt to justify its attacks on Cuba, including the economic, commercial and financial blockade. The ministry likewise rejected the unilateral and selective U.S. practice of listing countries as state sponsors of terrorism, which contravenes international law and the United Nations Charter. Cuba has been the victim of 713 terrorist attacks, mostly organized, financed and executed or sponsored by U.S. governments. These acts have cost the lives of over 3,000 Cuban citizens. The human and economic damages are estimated at $181 billion. And we'll be right back after this very short break, so don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. Tens of thousands of people fled the Eastern Democratic Republic of the Congo city of Goma on Thursday towards neighbouring Rwanda, after authorities warned of possible new eruptions from the Nyiragongo volcano, including underneath the nearby Lake Kivu. The city has been on edge since Africa's most active volcano erupted on Saturday, leaving at least 32 people dead. The military governor of North Kivu province stressed an eruption on land or under the lake could not be ruled out, and an evacuation of part of the city had been ordered, while urging residents to leave calmly. Tens of thousands of residents fled Goma last weekend after Nyiragongo erupted on Saturday night, many across the nearby border to Rwanda before returning. But strong aftershocks have continued, leading some buildings to collapse and leaving residents fearful of more to come.
We received instructions from the governor that we have to leave the city. I am in a district that has been cited, Kahembe, so I have to leave. And for me, Rwanda is closer than Minova, for example. There is a magma under the ground here in town that could erupt at any moment, right? You have been following this, and we have been asked to evacuate. They even said it was mandatory. The authorities have spoken. They have said that we must evacuate. They talked about the neighborhoods that need to be evacuated. I come from Bujabu. Now I am evacuating to go to Birere to take my sister. We are going to leave for Bukavu.
Somalia's government announced on Thursday that delayed elections would be held within 60 days following months of deadlock over the vote that erupted into violence. The central government and leaders of Somalia's 5 states had been unable to agree on the terms of a vote before the president's term lapsed in February. When the last round of UN-backed talks collapsed in April, the lower house of parliament passed a special bill extending the mandate of President Mohamed Abdullahi Mohamed, better known as Farmajo, by 2 years. However, the upper house rejected the move. The ensuing crisis ruptured stoked fears of outright civil war, with soldiers deserting their posts in the countryside to fight for their political allegiances in the capital, which forced Farmajo to reverse the mandate extension and to instruct the Prime Minister to hold talks with the country's regional leaders. This Thursday, senior military and government officials informed that Mali's former interim president and prime minister have been freed from military detention. The release came 3 days after they were detained in what appeared to be the country's second coup in 9 months. The development came a day after military officials said the transitional president and prime minister had resigned while in detention, in a move the United Nations described as unacceptable. Over the past few days, the UN, along with the African Union and other international bodies, had repeatedly urged Mali's military to release the transitional figures. However, their demands have fallen short of an immediate return to a civilian government, as was promised following the August 2020 coup. On Thursday, French President Emmanuel Macron recognised his country's role in the 1994 genocide in Rwanda, but fell short of offering an apology. The French head of state visited Rwanda after 3 decades of diplomatic tensions with a tour of the Kigali Genocide Memorial, where he paid tribute to some 800,000 mostly Tutsis who were slaughtered in the massacres. His highly anticipated speech did not contain a formal apology, but he went further than his predecessors and recognised that French support entailed backing a genocidal regime and ignoring warnings of the impending massacres. Macron is the first French leader since 2010 to visit the East African nation, which has long accused France of complicity in the killings. And as part of his visit to Rwanda, the French president announced the forthcoming appointment of a French ambassador to the country for the first time since 2015.
This new relationship that President Kagame and I wanted for France and for Rwanda, which allows us to move forward, is being built through these different sectors and these few pillars that I have just mentioned. The post has been vacant for 6 years, and the normalization of our relations could not be envisaged without this step.
On Thursday, Cyclone Yass weakened and turned into a depression after hitting the east coast of India and Bangladesh on Wednesday, leaving at least 12 dead and extensive damage to infrastructure. The storm hit on Wednesday with torrential rain and wind gusts of up to 155 kilometers per hour, equivalent to a Category 2 hurricane. Coastal cities were put on high alert and a complete lockdown was imposed in some towns to prevent people from venturing out, as the authorities evacuated those in low-lying areas and moved them to storm centres ahead of the cyclone's expected arrival. According to official reports, 2 people died in West Bengal, 2 in Odisha and 5 in neighbouring Bangladesh. The West Bengal Chief Minister said more than 300,000 homes were destroyed.
I stayed at a nearby village. All the homes have been hit. All our belongings have been damaged. Pipes, crops, money. It was sold in the house and everything has been damaged. Due to Cyclone Yass, the river embankment broke. Too much water came in. There was waist-deep water in our house. We weren't able to enter the house, so we were leaving and going to our relative house.
In this area, everyone has been harmed. Many people have lost their houses, all of them submerged in water. We are trying to rescue them one by one. No casualties have happened, but cattle have died.
In Afghanistan, 7 people were killed and at least 9 injured following an attack that authorities blamed on the Taliban. The mortar attack was carried out at a market in Kasar district in the northern Faryab province, injuring at least 2 security agents. The Taliban has not claimed responsibility for the attack. Since 2020, the Afghan government has been trying to restore peace through dialogue with the Taliban after 18 years of conflict following the invasion of the country by the United States. Meanwhile, the presence of foreign troops in the country continues. On Thursday, the Supreme Leader of Iran, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, called for massive participation in the upcoming presidential elections. The leader of the Islamic Revolution urged the citizens to go to the polls on June 18th and to ignore the campaigns aimed at undermining the exercise of their democratic rights, while also thanking the 585 candidates who did not qualify for the final stage of the elections. 7 candidates will compete for the Iranian presidential seat for a 4-year term that can be renewed only once. And we have more stories coming up after this final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. Syrian President Bashar Al-Assad won the presidential elections held on Wednesday with 95.1% of the vote to secure a 4th term in office. The Speaker of the People's Assembly announced the results at a press conference this Thursday, detailing that the president gained over 13.5 million ballots. With an electoral register inside and outside Syria of over 18.1 million, a total of over 14.2 million voters cast their ballots, representing turnout of 78.64%. The two other presidential candidates, former State Minister Abdallah Salom Abdallah and opposition figure Mahmoud Merhi, received 1.5% and 3.3% of the vote, respectively. The United Nations Security Council met on Thursday to address the situation in the Middle East, including Palestine, following Israel's latest attacks against the occupied territory. After 11 days of bombardment of the Gaza Strip by the Israeli regime, a ceasefire agreement was reached, but the attacks against Palestinians by settlers and Israeli occupation forces in East Jerusalem and the West Bank continue. UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres said it's crucial to respect the ceasefire and to offer more support to the Palestinian people. He called on the international community to work with the multilateral organisation to develop an aid package aimed at reconstruction and recovery of the occupied Palestinian territories. He also insisted on the need to return to the path of meaningful negotiations to end Israel's occupation of Palestine and allow for the establishment of two states on the basis of the 1967 borders. The United Nations Human Rights Council also discussed the situation in Palestine. During the session, High Commissioner Michelle Bachelet said that Israel's bombing of the Gaza Strip may constitute war crimes.
Such strikes raise serious concerns of Israel's compliance with the principles of distinction and proportionality under international humanitarian law. If found to be indiscriminate and disproportionate in their impact on civilians and civilian objects, such attacks may constitute war crimes.
High-ranking delegations from Israel and the Palestinian resistance movement Hamas agreed to meet next week in the Egyptian capital to consolidate the ceasefire agreed a week ago with the mediation of Cairo and to address issues such as the reconstruction of Gaza. Israel's foreign minister will lead the country's delegation to the meeting. Hamas political chief Ismail Haniyeh announced he would travel to Cairo in the coming days to discuss the stabilization of the ceasefire with Israel in the Gaza Strip. Representatives of the Palestinian Authority will also attend the talks. The Irish Parliament has condemned the annexation of Palestinian land by the Israeli regime. A motion was passed unanimously rejecting the de facto annexation of Palestinian territories by Israel, as Ireland became the first country in the European Union to describe Israel's colonialist practices as such and declare itself against Israeli expansionism. The motion, sponsored by the opposition Sinn Féin party, was passed with the support of all parties represented in the Parliament. Ireland's Foreign Minister Simon Coveney hailed the motion as a clear signal of the depth of feeling in the country. John Brady, a member of Parliament for the Sinn Féin party, called the vote a victory for justice. A proposal to expel the Israeli ambassador to the Republic and impose comprehensive sanctions against Israel was, however, rejected. In Brazil, more than 100 impeachment requests filed against President Jair Bolsonaro are being analysed by lawmakers. President of the Brazilian Chamber of Deputies, Arthur Lira, announced that an assembly will be held to evaluate all the petitions for impeachment against the president, which are based on his failure to tackle the major socio-economic crisis affecting the country and his mishandling of the COVID-19 epidemic. At the same time, the Parliamentary Commission of Inquiry continues its investigations into the government's handling of the health crisis. On Thursday, the Parliamentary Inquiry Commission met with the director of the Butantan Institute to address the difficulties the health centre is facing in producing vaccines against COVID-19. The request for the meeting was presented by Senator Alessandro Vieira, who stated that the appearance of Dimas Kovas, head of the Butantan Institute, was necessary to clarify all the details of the performance of the institute since the beginning of the pandemic, especially with regard to the production of vaccines. The Vice President of the Parliamentary Commission, Randolph Rodriguez, called for clarification of the reasons for the delay in the delivery of supplies from China, leading to the paralysation of the packaging of the vaccine. This Thursday, the Russian Direct Investment Fund announced the signing of an agreement for the supply of 220 million doses of the Sputnik V vaccine with UNICEF. According to a statement, the amount is sufficient to vaccinate 110 million people. The Russian fund is also holding separate negotiations with Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance, to see the Sputnik V vaccine considered for inclusion in the COVAX facility's portfolio of COVID-19 vaccines. The COVAX facility, together with the UNICEF, aims to help end the acute phase of the global pandemic by the end of 2021 by providing rapid, fair and equitable access to safe and effective vaccines to all participating countries and territories, regardless of income level, and enabling the protection of frontline healthcare and social workers, as well as other high-risk and vulnerable groups. And we've come to the end of this news brief, but remember you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. You can also follow us for all the latest news on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and Telegram. And you can catch up on our shows on our YouTube channel. For TeleSUR English, I'm Katrina Goss. Thank you for watching.